On the fateful morning of December 29, a Jeju Air flight attempting to land at Muan International Airport in South Korea met with unimaginable disaster. The plane, carrying 181 souls, veered off the runway during an emergency belly landing, exploding into flames and leaving behind a trail of devastation. An accident now etched as one of the deadliest in South Korea's aviation history. This catastrophe raises countless questions. How could such a widely trusted aircraft model, the Boeing 737-800, fail so disastrously? Could this tragedy have been prevented if the landing gear had deployed as expected? Was a bird strike the real cause, or is there more to the story? These are just a few of the mysteries gripping investigators and the public alike. As you immerse yourself in the details of this harrowing event, from the initial distress signals to the heartbreaking aftermath, you'll uncover startling revelations. From eyewitness accounts of sparks and explosions to the survivors' chilling descriptions of the moments before impact, every detail paints a picture of a tragedy that should have never occurred. The crash didn't just claim lives. It shook a nation to its core and ignited fierce debates about safety protocols and aviation standards. We're dedicated to exploring every angle of this incident, peeling back layers of mystery to bring you the full story. But this is just one of the many compelling and eye-opening cases we delve into on our channel. If stories of intrigue, resilience, and tragedy captivate you, be sure to hit the subscribe button. Join us as we uncover the truth behind the world's most shocking events. Don't forget to like and share so we can continue bringing you the stories that matter most. The tragic crash of the Jeju Air flight on December 29 unfolded in a harrowing series of events that transformed a routine landing into one of the deadliest aviation disasters in South Korea's history. The aircraft's descent toward Muan International Airport, located approximately 288 kilometers southwest of Seoul, seemed ordinary at first, but subtle signs of trouble soon escalated into a catastrophic failure. As the plane approached the runway, air traffic controllers issued a warning about potential hazards in the area. The flight crew quickly realized a critical problem. The landing gear had failed to deploy. Despite their extensive experience, the pilots were forced to abort their initial landing attempt and circle back for an emergency belly landing. The absence of functional landing gear, a critical component for safe touchdown, created a situation fraught with peril. With no choice but to proceed, the crew prepared for one of the riskiest maneuvers in aviation. The aircraft descended once more, this time aiming to land without the support of its landing gear. Upon contact with the runway, the plane's belly scraped along the tarmac, generating intense friction that sent sparks and smoke trailing from the rear of the aircraft. The situation was further compounded by the plane's high speed, which made it nearly impossible to control or slow down effectively. The runway's limited length provided little margin for error. As the aircraft skidded out of control, it hurtled toward the end of the tarmac, colliding with a concrete barrier. The force of the impact was devastating, igniting a massive explosion that engulfed the plane in flames. The inferno consumed much of the fuselage, leaving behind a scene of utter devastation. Debris scattered across the airfield as the fire raged, reducing the once mighty aircraft to a skeletal wreck. Emergency responders arrived swiftly, battling the flames in a desperate attempt to save lives. However, the scale of destruction was overwhelming. Out of the 181 passengers and crew on board, only 2 flight attendants, seated at the rear of the plane, survived the crash. They were pulled from the wreckage and rushed to the hospital, suffering injuries but remarkably conscious. The remaining 179 people, including families, children, and elderly travelers, perished in the tragedy. The aftermath of the crash raised critical questions about what went wrong. While a bird strike is being investigated as a possible cause of the landing gear failure, the sequence of events leading to the disaster revealed additional vulnerabilities. Experts questioned the adequacy of the airport's emergency preparedness, noting the absence of fire suppression measures and the proximity of barriers at the runway's end. Furthermore, speculation arose about whether the runway's shorter length contributed to the inability to stop the aircraft in time. The events of that morning left an indelible mark on South Korea's aviation history. This disaster not only claimed lives, but also sparked debates about aviation safety, emergency response protocols, and the fragility of even the most trusted systems. The recovery of the flight's black boxes has offered a starting point for understanding the technical and human factors involved, but the answers will take time to unravel. Amid the devastation of the Jeju Air flight crash, two remarkable stories of survival emerged. Both survivors, crew members seated toward the rear of the plane, lived through a tragedy that claimed the lives of 179 others. Although injured, they were conscious and able to provide haunting details of the moments leading up to the disaster. One survivor, a male flight attendant named Lee, recalled feeling a strong impact as the plane touched down without its landing gear. Secured in his crew seat with his seatbelt fastened, he described hearing an explosion and seeing smoke engulf the cabin moments before the aircraft shattered upon collision with a concrete barrier. His memory of the immediate aftermath was fragmented, a result of the shock and the severity of the event. When rescued, Lee repeatedly asked, "What happened? Why am I here?" His injuries included a fractured left shoulder and head trauma, but he was stable and able to walk with assistance. Where Griffin was able to hang on for longer, Lee was able to make the pull up. The second survivor, a female flight attendant in her late 20s, recounted a similarly terrifying experience. She described seeing smoke emanating from one of the engines before the plane exploded. Rescued alongside her colleague, she suffered minor injuries but remained conscious throughout the ordeal. Her vivid recollections of the engine trouble matched eyewitness reports from people on the ground, reinforcing initial theories of a mechanical failure exacerbated by external factors. Both survivors were rescued from the wreckage by emergency teams and transported to a nearby hospital for treatment. Their accounts, combined with evidence from the crash site, have been critical in piecing together the sequence of events. These testimonies are not just key to the ongoing investigation, they are a sobering reminder of the human resilience and fragility in moments of unimaginable peril. For these two crew members, survival came at a cost. Physically injured and emotionally scarred, they carry the weight of a tragedy that continues to haunt the families of those who were lost. Their survival, while miraculous, underscores the profound loss and the unanswered questions that still linger over this heartbreaking disaster. One of the leading theories in the investigation of the Jeju Air flight crash revolves around the possibility of a bird strike, a sudden collision between the aircraft and a bird or flock of birds during its descent. Investigators believe this natural hazard may have been the catalyst for the landing gear malfunction, setting off the catastrophic chain of events. Moments before the ill-fated landing attempt, air traffic controllers at Muan International Airport reportedly issued a warning to the pilots about unusual bird activity in the area. Witnesses on the ground later confirmed seeing an unusually large flock of birds near the runway that morning, raising questions about whether the airport's bird control measures were sufficient. South Korean law mandates year-round bird deterrence programs, yet staff described the density of the flock as unprecedented. The bird strike theory gained further traction when preliminary analyses suggested the possibility of damage to the landing gear during the plane's descent. While bird strikes are relatively common in aviation, they rarely cause severe mechanical failures. Experts have pointed out that the undercarriage of the Boeing 737-800 is robustly designed to withstand various impacts, making it unusual for a bird strike to completely disable the landing gear. Investigators are awaiting detailed data from the aircraft's black boxes, which could confirm or refute this hypothesis. The cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder will provide critical insights into the moments leading up to the crash, including whether the pilots encountered a bird strike or any related anomaly. Despite its plausibility, the bird strike theory has faced scrutiny. Aviation safety experts have noted that while bird strikes can cause significant damage to engines or windshields, they seldom lead to the complete failure of landing gear deployment. This discrepancy has sparked debates within the aviation community, with some questioning whether additional factors, such as maintenance issues or human error, could have contributed to the tragedy. The bird strike hypothesis also raises broader concerns about airport safety protocols. Critics have questioned why no preemptive action was taken to manage the bird hazard that morning, given the observed flock. Moreover, the airport's infrastructure, including the proximity of barriers to the runway's end, has come under scrutiny for possibly exacerbating the severity of the crash. As the investigation continues, the bird strike theory remains one of the most debated aspects of this tragedy. If confirmed, it will not only shed light on the specific circumstances of the Jeju Air flight, but also prompt a re-evaluation of bird control measures and aviation safety standards globally. The scale of the rescue operations following the Jeju Air flight crash was immense, involving over 1,500 personnel, including firefighters, police officers, military staff, and medical teams. Despite the valiant efforts of these responders, serious concerns have been raised about the adequacy of emergency preparedness at Muan International Airport, and whether more lives could have been saved with better planning and execution. One of the most glaring issues highlighted was the apparent lack of fire suppression measures in place before the aircraft attempted its emergency belly landing. Experts have noted that in similar high-risk situations, standard aviation protocols recommend spreading fire-retardant foam along the runway as a precautionary measure. This foam helps minimize the risk of an aircraft fire by reducing friction and containing potential fuel spills upon impact. However, no such preparations were made, leaving the aircraft vulnerable to the catastrophic explosion that ensued. Additionally, questions have been raised about why fire trucks and emergency vehicles were not stationed closer to the runway in anticipation of the high-risk landing. Aviation safety experts have pointed out that in emergencies involving landing gear failure, it is standard practice for airports to mobilize firefighting and rescue equipment to respond immediately upon touchdown. The absence of such proactive measures has led to speculation that the airport was unprepared for an event of this magnitude. Criticism has also been directed toward the airport's infrastructure. The presence of a concrete barrier at the end of the runway contributed to the devastating impact when the plane skidded off the tarmac. While the airport reportedly meets international safety standards, the proximity of such obstacles has sparked debate about whether these standards are sufficient to prevent similar tragedies. The lack of visible emergency readiness extended beyond the runway. Families of the victims reported frustration with the delayed response in providing information and access to the crash site. Some expressed anger over the perceived disorganization and lack of clear communication from the authorities and the airline, compounding their grief and anxiety. This disaster has highlighted significant gaps in emergency preparedness, not just at Muan International Airport, but potentially across other similar facilities. It has raised urgent questions about the readiness of airports to handle such crises and the effectiveness of protocols designed to mitigate the impact of catastrophic events. As investigations continue, the shortcomings in emergency response will undoubtedly be scrutinized alongside the technical causes of the crash. This tragedy is a sobering reminder that even the most advanced safety systems and experienced personnel can fall short without proper planning, coordination, and adherence to best practices in aviation crisis management. The investigation into the Jeju Air flight tragedy is now centered on understanding what caused the catastrophic sequence of events that led to the loss of 179 lives. Central to this effort is the analysis of the plane's black boxes, both the cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder, which were recovered from the wreckage hours after the crash. These devices hold the key to unraveling the technical and human factors that contributed to this aviation disaster. The flight data recorder, retrieved around 11:30 a.m., contains detailed parameters of the aircraft's systems, including speed, altitude, engine performance, and the status of critical components like the landing gear. The cockpit voice recorder, recovered a few hours later, is expected to provide a comprehensive account of the communications between the flight crew and air traffic control in the moments leading up to the crash. Together, these devices are anticipated to offer crucial insights into what went wrong. One of the leading theories under investigation is that a bird strike during descent caused the landing gear to malfunction. This hypothesis gained traction after air traffic controllers warned the pilots about unusual bird activity near the airport moments before the failed landing attempt. Additionally, witnesses and airport staff reported seeing a dense flock of birds in the area earlier that morning. However, aviation safety experts remain divided on whether a bird strike alone could explain the extent of the mechanical failure. Bird strikes, though common in aviation, rarely result in catastrophic outcomes. The landing gear of commercial aircraft like the Boeing 747-800 is designed to withstand substantial impact, leading some experts to suggest that other factors may have been involved. These could include undetected maintenance issues, a failure in the hygienical electronic systems controlling the gear, or even pilot error in handling the emergency situation. The investigation has also sparked broader debates about the adequacy of safety measures at Muan International Airport. Critics have pointed to the potential role of infrastructure, such as the concrete barrier at the end of the runway, in exacerbating the severity of the crash. Additionally, questions about the airport's bird control protocols have come under scrutiny, as South Korean law mandates year-round measures to mitigate such risks. While the bird strike theory remains a focus, investigators are considering all possibilities, including external environmental factors, mechanical defects, and procedural errors. The analysis of the black boxes is expected to take weeks or even months, as experts meticulously piece together the timeline of events. The results of this investigation will not only determine the cause of the Jeju air crash, but will also have significant implications for global aviation safety standards. Whether it reveals a rare mechanical failure, lapses in airport safety protocols, or a combination of factors, the findings will be critical in preventing such tragedies in the future. As the world watches, families of the victims, aviation professionals, and the general public await answers to the questions left by this devastating event. Eyewitness accounts of the Jeju Air flight crash paint a vivid and horrifying picture of the final moments of the ill-fated plane. People in the vicinity of Muan International Airport described seeing sparks, hearing unusual metallic noises, and witnessing explosions as the aircraft struggled to land. These first-hand observations, combined with the aftermath faced by families of the victims, underscore the chaos and tragedy of that morning. One witness, a local resident named Yu Jae Young, recounted seeing sparks emanating from the plane's right wing moments before the crash. As I told my family that the plane seemed to have a problem, I heard a loud explosion, he said. Thick black smoke then billowed into the sky, signaling the devastating impact. Another observer, a man walking near the airport, described the plane's erratic descent. Saw it descending and assumed it was about to land, but then I noticed a spark and heard a series of explosions. Other witnesses described a terrifying sequence of events, including the plane circling the airport after a failed initial landing attempt, followed by its high-speed belly landing. The metallic noises and sparks reported by onlookers have fueled theories of mechanical failure, possibly linked to the suspected bird strike. Ground observers noted that the aircraft seemed to be in distress even before it touched the runway. For families of the victims, the aftermath of the crash was equally harrowing. Gathered at the airport, they endured agonizing waits for news about their loved ones. Many expressed frustration over delays in identifying victims and what they perceived as a slow response from both authorities and the airline. Their anguish was compounded by restricted access to the crash site, which was deemed too dangerous due to the scale of destruction. Tensions ran high when acting President Choi Sang-mok visited the airport to console grieving families. Surrounded by distraught relatives, he faced demands for answers and accountability. The lack of immediate information and the perceived disorganization of rescue and recovery efforts deepened the family's pain. The eyewitness testimonies and the emotional toll on the victims' families have become an integral part of the narrative surrounding the crash. They not only highlight the human cost of the disaster, but also serve as a reminder of the importance of transparency, preparedness, and swift communication in the wake of such tragedies. These accounts are being carefully analyzed alongside technical evidence to piece together the full story of what happened on that fateful day. In the wake of the devastating Jeju air flight crash, the South Korean government, led by acting President Choi Sang-mok, responded swiftly and with solemn resolve. The tragic loss of 179 lives left the nation in shock, prompting immediate governmental action to support the victims' families and ensure thorough investigation and prevent future disasters. Acting President Choi declared a national mourning period, symbolizing the collective grief of a nation mourning its greatest aviation tragedy in nearly 3 decades. Flags across government offices were flown at half-mast, and civil servants were instructed to wear black ribbons in honor of those lost. This period of mourning was set to last until January 4, allowing the nation to reflect on the tragedy and offer support to the victims' families during their time of loss. In addition to marking the mourning period, Choi declared Muan International Airport a disaster zone, a designation that would expedite recovery efforts and allow for greater resources to be mobilized. The government also vowed to assist in the recovery of the victims, offering compensation to the families and organizing memorial services across the country. One of the most significant commitments made by acting President Choi was the promise of a full and transparent investigation into the causes of the crash. This investigation was to be carried out with the utmost urgency and thoroughness, as authorities sought to uncover the root causes of the disaster and determine whether it was the result of mechanical failure, human error, or infrastructure inadequacies. The findings of this investigation would be vital not only for understanding the crash but also for addressing the broader concerns of aviation safety in South Korea and globally. Furthermore, Choi's administration vowed to implement reforms to ensure that such a tragedy would never occur again. This included a review of airport safety measures, aviation regulations, and emergency preparedness protocols. The public and families of the victims were reassured that the government would leave no stone unturned in its quest to prevent future accidents and to hold accountable any parties responsible for negligence or failure in ensuring safety. Acting President Choi's response was seen as a critical moment for South Korea's leadership, as the country navigated both a political crisis and the immense grief of a national disaster. His actions set the tone for the government's approach to both the immediate aftermath of the crash and the long-term measures needed to safeguard public trust in the country's aviation systems. In the coming months, South Koreans will be watching closely as investigations continue and reforms unfold, hoping that lessons learned from this horrific event will lead to a safer future for air travel. The response from the government has emphasized the importance of not only addressing the technical causes of the crash, but also the broader responsibilities of maintaining public safety in the aviation industry. The involvement of the Boeing 737-800 in the Jeju air flight crash has raised significant questions given the aircraft's reputation as one of the most widely used and reliable models in commercial aviation. This model has been a staple in the fleets of airlines worldwide for decades, known for its safety record and performance under a variety of conditions. However, the catastrophic failure of this particular flight has led many to scrutinize how such a trusted aircraft could be involved in such a tragic incident? The U.S. Air Force primetime chronicler John Christopher Taylor has written of the incident. The Boeing 737-800, part of the larger 737 Next Generation series, has been lauded for its efficiency, reliability, and safety over its years of service. With over 5,000 units delivered to airlines globally, it makes up a significant portion of the world's commercial fleet, particularly in Asia, Europe, and North America. Its safety record has been largely positive, with few major accidents, making the involvement of a 737-800 in such a devastating crash all the more perplexing. The fact that the aircraft was in service for over 20 years without prior major incidents further complicates the investigation. The 737-800 is designed to endure significant wear and tear, with rigorous maintenance protocols in place to ensure its continued safe operation. Given this, aviation experts are questioning what specific combination of factors could have led to a failure of such magnitude, especially considering the plane's history of reliability. Initial investigations have pointed to the possibility of a bird strike, which may have damaged the landing gear, as a contributing factor to the crash. However, aviation safety experts have expressed skepticism about whether a bird strike alone could have caused the complete failure of the landing gear. While bird strikes are a known risk in aviation, they typically do not lead to catastrophic failures in the 737-800, whose landing gear is built to withstand various types of impact. The plane's involvement in such a tragedy has led to increased scrutiny of both the aircraft's design and the circumstances surrounding this specific flight. Could there have been a latent mechanical issue with this particular aircraft that went unnoticed during routine maintenance checks? Were there external factors, like the bird strike, that overwhelmed the aircraft's systems beyond normal operational tolerances? These questions are central to the ongoing investigation, as experts and regulators seek to determine whether the crash was the result of a rare combination of circumstances or indicative of a deeper, systemic issue. This tragedy has shaken public confidence in the safety of the Boeing 737-800, even though it remains one of the most reliable aircraft in service today. The incident has prompted calls for a re-evaluation of safety protocols, maintenance standards, and emergency response strategies for all aircraft, not just the 737-800. As the investigation progresses, the aviation industry, passengers, and families affected by the disaster will be closely watching for answers to why this trusted aircraft, with a strong safety record, was involved in such a devastating crash. The crash of the Jeju air flight on December 29 marks South Korea's worst aviation disaster since 1997, sending shockwaves through the nation and the aviation industry at large. The tragedy has not only claimed 179 lives, but has also sparked urgent and widespread discussions on how to prevent similar incidents in the future. As the nation mourns its loss, questions surrounding bird control, airport emergency protocols, and broader aviation safety standards have taken center stage. This devastating event has highlighted the vulnerabilities in safety measures that many thought were foolproof. The possibility of a bird strike causing a critical failure in the aircraft's landing gear has raised alarms about the adequacy of bird control at airports. The dense flock of birds spotted near Muan International Airport on the day of the crash has raised serious concerns about the effectiveness of existing bird deterrent systems and the potential risks they pose to flight safety. In light of this, experts and regulators are calling for a re-evaluation of how airports handle bird control, and whether more proactive measures need to be taken to protect aircraft during landing and takeoff. Equally concerning are the lapses in emergency preparedness. The absence of fire suppression foam on the runway and the lack of immediate fire trucks near the landing area have raised questions about how well airports are prepared to respond to high-risk situations. The scale of this tragedy has prompted a broader conversation about the need for airports to reassess their emergency response strategies, ensuring that such failures are not repeated in the future. As investigators continue to search for answers and uncover the causes of the crash, there is an undeniable urgency to reform aviation safety practices. From bird control measures to runway safety and emergency preparedness, the lessons learned from this disaster will undoubtedly shape the future of air travel in South Korea and beyond. This event serves as a stark reminder of how fragile air travel can be, and the need for continuous improvement in safety standards to protect passengers, crews, and their families. As we wait for further developments and answers, the push for change is already underway. If you want to stay updated on the latest findings, discussions, and ongoing investigations into this tragedy and other significant events, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Stay informed and be part of the conversation about the changes needed to ensure such disasters are prevented in the future. Your voice matters in this global dialogue about aviation safety. Don't miss out on more in-depth analysis of cases like this. Subscribe now and stay tuned.